2 years ago when I first came, the first thing we did was the book of Esther. Um, but a lot of y'all weren't here, and maybe you've even forgotten some of it. So then we're going to do a one class recap, and the reason we're doing it today is because tomorrow night is the holiday of Purim, which is found here in the book of Esther. So this is the time of year for Esther, okay? And I'm going to bring to you a lot of very fascinating things, even that have happened even yesterday, that have to do with the book of Esther. So this is not my PowerPoint; is one I got bought from Rose Publications. So some of it I have to skip through because they are text heavy, and I don't put a lot of text in mine, as you know. I put some. But they have this little background here. Remember from studying Esther and Daniel, remember that Nebuchadnezzar came and destroyed Jerusalem and destroyed the temple, and that is in the book of Daniel. And then he carried the Jewish people away into 70 years of captivity. And then Persia destroyed Babylon, if you remember. Nebuchadnezzar died. Persia came on the scene. And when Persia came on the scene, Cyrus the Great, he had a different idea about things, and he said, you know what, the Jews can go back home. Let them go back. And yes. Oh, how's it? So he let them go back, and they did go back, many of them, but some of them did not. Some of them stayed in Persia because they had houses there and they had businesses and whatever. And that is how we get the book of Esther, right? Because Esther and Mordecai, they are living in Persia, not in Israel. And that's how we get them during the time of Persia. So that's just a little bit of history. We don't have time to read all that. Remember that the Jews who did go back rebuilt the temple. So that's how we got the second temple. For those who did go back, they rebuilt a temple. But then Mordecai, Esther, and others stayed in Persia. But it's very important to remember this map. Persia controlled almost all this known world of that time. So even though they didn't live in the ones who lived in Israel, I guess what I'm trying to say is, were still controlled by Persia, even though they weren't living over here. This is Susa, which is where the palace was. This is Babylon. Over here is Israel. So Persia, all this light color, all the way over to here, all this was the Persian Empire. So they were still controlling this, even though they didn't live there, they were still controlled by the Persians. So any law that the Persians passed was also going to affect the land of Israel. I guess that's what I'm trying to get you to see. Okay, so quickly we have to go through the story. Remember, the first queen was named Vashti, and the king Ahasuerus called her in. He wanted to show her beauty. He had thrown this big banquet for all of his generals. This is in chapter 1. And she said something you never told Ahasuerus. No. No one ever said no to him. So he got really mad, but he didn't kill her. But he did put her out, and I guess we would say divorced her, whatever. And the people that advised him said, you know what, you have to put her out and just find someone else. Have a beauty contest and find a better queen. So now, remember I told you about 3 or 4 years passed between him putting away Vashti and actually when he found Esther, because in that time, that's when he went and had this little war with the Greeks, which he lost. And then he came back. So he's come back from the war that he lost. He doesn't have a queen. And now his advisors are like, you know what, you need to do something and get a new queen. And that's when they have what I call the Persian beauty contest. And and got Esther. Now, Esther's cousin, Mordecai, worked there in the palace, and I guess that's how he knew about it. And he told Esther, "Look, you need to enter into this." And this had to be all part of God's plan, right? Because God wanted Esther to be what she was. He wanted her to be the queen. But he told her and they don't have the verses in here. And I knew if I put them all in here, then it would make it way too long, and I couldn't do it in just the time of one class. But remember, he told her very clearly, do not tell anybody you're Jewish. Hide your identity. So her Hebrew name had been Hadassah, which means myrtle, like the tree, the myrtle. But Esther is actually her Persian name, okay? And it has to do with being hidden, which is kind of neat because she was hidden. She hid who she really was, right? And she didn't tell anybody. So Hadassah, and now Mordecai, he doesn't really have a quote Jewish name. We just think of him as Mordecai, which is kind of related to this Babylonian god. But I will tell you that now in modern Jewish culture, Mordecai is a very famous name because they want to use his name because he was a very great hero. Okay. So the things that we know about Esther comes from her actions. We don't really have anybody sitting down and saying, this is how Esther was. And she never sat down and said, okay, this is how I feel or whatever. So we just have to look at how she interacted with Ahasuerus and Mordecai and the people that served her to know exactly the kind of person she was. And she is really not a passive person. She's more like she's a go-getter kind of person, I think. But she really knew. I think she was very smart, and she knew the protocols for everything. Um, so this is how I think of Esther. Okay, I think of her as an ancient Melania Trump. Beautiful, very smart, knows when to sit, when to stand, where you're supposed to be, everything you're supposed to do, and she would never go against any protocol. Right? That would be Esther, which makes it so weird that she did what she did, right? Because she did go against a protocol. So the first little thing that happens is that Mordecai overheard two of Ahasuerus' personal bodyguards plotting to kill him. If I don't know if you remember that, it was in chapter 3. And he told Esther, and this is why Esther is not passive, okay? Because what did she do? Did she say, "Oh, Ahasuerus will handle it"? No, she called her bodyguards and she said, "Kill those two, take them out. Don't even tell the king. We'll handle it. We don't want to bother him." Right? And that's what they did, right? And they wrote it down in the chronicles of the daily events. But she told them, she said, "And when you write it down, make sure you put down that Mordecai exposed this plot, not me." And that was very important because later on, when King Ahasuerus reads those chronicles, he finds out that Mordecai actually saved his life. Actually, it's Mordecai and Esther together because those two guys were going to kill him that day. If you remember, I told you that the main way they got rid of kings, they didn't have elections, okay, was assassinations. And they didn't have guns and all this stuff, so the two ways they did assassinations was either poisoning or they had to stab you. And in order to stab you, that means they got to be close to you, right? So they can't do a long range thing. You can't be like across the street in a tower and shoot somebody with a high powered gun. You've got to be right there with them if you're going to kill them. You either got to pour something in their coffee or or you've got to remember I told you they would often carry those little tiny knives and they would put it in their sleeve. and they would get up close to you, and then they would just go, and that was it, and you were dead. So it had to be people very, very close, and that's why the king had to be very, very careful who he trusted and who was his guards and his personal assistants and all these things. So these two were in a position where they could have done it, but Mordecai exposed them, and Esther had them taken out. Um, so that's one thing that happens, and now we have to put that on the back burner and remember, okay, that is going to happen. Now the other thing that Ahasuerus does that's really bad is he appoints Haman as who was a close advisor, and he actually elevated him and made him what we would call the prime minister, okay, second in command, and he gave him his signet ring. Ahasuerus took his ring off and gave it to him and said, "Here, do whatever you want to do, write whatever law you want to write, stamp it with a ring, and it goes through." And he had put a very, very wicked person into that position. Now, this great position went to his head, okay? It went to Haman's head. And what he did was he demanded that when he walked by, everybody, whoever it was, other than the king, they had to bow down to him. Because after all, man, I'm the prime minister, so you got to bow down to me. So every time he would walk around, all the Persians were, groveling at his feet, but one person did not. And you know who that was, right? Mordecai. He would not bow down to him. I think he stood on his tiptoes. And this made Haman furious. And when he found out that Mordecai was Jewish, because see, Mordecai and Esther are cousins, right? So we know they're Jewish. Now, it was not everybody knew that Mordecai was Jewish, but they didn't know about Esther because she kept it hidden. Then he had a vendetta, not just to Mordecai. I'm not just going to hurt you, but I'm going to hurt all of your people. He was very, very angry. So the question we have to ask is, why wouldn't Mordecai bow down to him? What's a little harm in just bow? I mean, he is the prime minister after all. Well, here's the thing. It tells us in the book of Esther, and again, there's verses for all this, but I just couldn't put it all in here because I knew it would blossom the presentation. I wouldn't be able to get through it. So I just have to talk you through it. It says that Haman is the Agagite. I think it's in Esther chapter 3. Haman the Agagite. And what does that mean? Well, we have to go back about 500 years to a king called Agag. I don't know if you remember him. And this is in the book of Samuel. And Saul, who was the very first king of Israel, was given a command to kill certain people because they were coming against the Jewish people. And God said, no, you have to kill them. You have to take them out. And this king, Saul spared. And he spared, if you remember the story, he spared all the best of the flock. But then when Samuel came, remember, and there was a delay in Samuel coming. When Samuel finally got there, Saul said, I did everything you told me to do. And Samuel said, well, why do I hear why do I see all these people that you were supposed to kill and all these flocks and herds, and you haven't done anything you were supposed to do? And God passed a judgment instantly at that moment and said, Saul is no more king. I'll find someone better. His neighbor. I already have prepared for me a king and his neighbor who is better than him. And of course we know who that was, right? That was David, King David. But he didn't become king instantly. It was a 10-year period. But anyway, from that moment on, in God's timing, Saul was out and David was in. And we think, well, that was pretty severe. He just didn't kill a few people. And, sometimes people will read that and they say, well, God was kind of severe with Saul. Well, you know what? God can see the future. And he saw that Agag was going to have descendants. And one of them was going to be Haman. And so when Saul did not do what he was supposed to do, he actually endangered the entire Jewish race. Because 500 years in the future, a descendant of that man that he didn't kill is going to rise up and try to kill all the Jewish people. So that's why God was so severe with him. This is probably also why Haman hated Mordecai, because he remembered this. All right, my ancestor, King Agag, Samuel was actually the one that actually ended up killing King Agag. Your descendants killed your not descendants. Your ancestors killed my ancestors, and I'm going to get you back. Because now he's in a position to do so, because he's a prime minister, and the king gave him his ring and said, do whatever you want to do, sign it with the ring. I don't care. Now that was not a good thing for Ahasuerus to do, but Ahasuerus is a very, very vain person, okay? And Haman had kind of inflated his ego. So there's always an ancient enmity between the Amalekites, the descendants of Agag, and the Israelites. And do you know that this very week, yesterday, in the synagogue, the Torah portion that the Jewish people read, you know what? It was the Torah portion about the Amalekites. Because this is the Shabbat before Purim, which is starting tomorrow night at sundown. So they always read this story that I'm telling you about the Amalekites and King Agag and all these things. They always read that. So now I already told you all that. Haman was Agag. Now the other thing here, this is the other thing that's really amazing. Do you remember what tribes King Saul was from? David is from Judah, right? King Saul was not from Judah. Remember what tribe he's from? He's from Benjamin, which is the same tribe Mordecai is from, and Esther. So, sometimes when people mess up and make the wrong decision, what do we want to do? You shouldn't have done that, That's what we do, right? Why did you do that? We want to push them on down. But what does God do? God says, Benjamin, you made this mess. 500 years ago, Saul messed up, and he created this situation. So, Benjamin, step up. You got to fix it. God gives us a second chance. He says, the one that made the mess, now you got to get up there and fix it. It's your responsibility. So Mordecai and Esther are from the tribe of Benjamin. Tribe of Benjamin messed up 500 years ago, but now the tribe of Benjamin is going to fix it. And God's going to use the most unlikely people to turn the whole situation around. Okay? So Haman cast lots. You know what lots are? Like rolling the dice. And the Persian word for lot is P-U-R, pur. And if you have more than one, we say lots, right? We put an S on it. But in Hebrew, you put im on the end if it's a plural. So that's how we get that word, Purim. It simply means it means lots, the casting of lots. Because there's a whole thing in chapter 4, I think, where every day Haman is casting lots to figure out the perfect day that he's going to destroy the Jewish people. And he casts lots and he casts lots. And finally he comes up with a day, and he said it's going to be on the 13th day of the month of Adar. So Adar, those of you that had the Hebrew calendar, Adar is 1 month before Nisan. Now we're in Adar right now, right? Because tomorrow night is Purim. So today we're on the 12th of Adar. Nisan is when Passover is. Passover is the 14th of Nisan, and exactly 1 month prior, the 13th and 14th of Adar, is when Haman says, that's when I'm going to kill him. That's when I'm going to do it. Now, do you know when he writes the evil decree and sends it out through all the land for the Jewish people to know that this is going to happen to them? He does it on the 12th day of Nisan and lets them know, basically Passover Eve, he lets them know, hey, Jews, you think you're going to celebrate Passover where you escaped from Pharaoh? What he didn't do, I'm going to finish the job. In exactly 11 months, you're all dead. So they're knowing from the 13th of Nisan, you have 11 months to the next Adar, and I have this decree, I'm going to kill every one of you. And he has it signed by the king, and he also promised to pay a couple of $1 billion in silver into the king's treasury, King Ahasuerus, for letting him do this. So the king is like, sure, yeah, go ahead. Lots of money. Who are these people? Jews anyway? Haman said, oh, you don't need to worry yourself with them. They're against everything you believe. What Ahasuerus didn't know, what did he not know? His beautiful, lovely wife is Jewish. Because remember, it's hidden from him. So now when the decree is passed, Mordecai, all the Jews go into mourning, and Mordecai goes to Esther and he says, now you got to do something. And what I told you to keep quiet, now you got to speak up. And you got to go to the king and you got to talk to him. And you know, she's perfect in protocol. And she says, well, he hasn't called me, and it's illegal to go into the throne room unless he calls you, because you can be killed instantly because of all the guards there. And he says, you have got to go. You know, basically, I think what she had to come to realize is, I'm already dead. I'm dead already. The decree had already been passed. And once you realize you're dead already, then I think her fear to go in there went away when she realized, you know what, I'm already dead. I'm going to die already anyway. So why be afraid to go in there? And of course, he did not kill her. So there was a fast called the Fast of Esther, and then she went in before the king, and he did not kill her, right? He held out the golden scepter to her, and he said, what is thy petition? What is thy request? Up until half the kingdom, I'll give it to you. I don't know if he was really going to give her half the kingdom, or if that was just kind of a saying they had. Because if you remember, what Pastor Mark just went over it the other night, one night, I think it was Wednesday night, about Herod said the same thing. Remember? To Herodotus? He said, what is your petition? I'll give you half the kingdom. So that could have just been a saying, or he might have really meant it. But what did she ask? She said, come to my banquet. Only 2 people, you and Haman, tomorrow. He said, well, okay. But I think he thought, okay, this is really weird. She broke protocol to ask me to come to a party, you know? This is not like Esther. The next night at the banquet, he said, okay, now, out with it. What is your petition? What is your request? She said, come to the next banquet tomorrow night. You and Haman, just the 2 of you. So between banquet number 1 and banquet number 2, 2 important things happened. Number 1, that night, the king couldn't sleep. I think he was worried about Esther. He's like, this is so weird. She's breaking all protocol. What is wrong with her? Don't you know when something's wrong with somebody that you know really well, and you're like, I know something's wrong with them, but they're just not telling me. I think he knew something was bothering her. So he couldn't sleep. So he said, bring the history books in. Let me read them. And of course, someone read them to him. And guess what they read? It just so happened, okay, coincidence or providence. It's always providence, right? It just so happened that they read the passage where the 2 guys were going to kill him, and Mordecai saved his life. And he was like, I didn't know that. When did that happen? Did anybody honor Mordecai? No one ever honored him. Well, we've got to make that right. Now, that same night, Haman is full of all this pride because he's getting to go to 2 banquets with just him and the king and queen. He thinks he's like, as my mom would say, a big shot, you know. She always used that word, oh, he's a big shot, you know. I'm sure he was full of himself, right? I got to go to this banquet and I get to go to another one tomorrow night. But when he left banquet number 1 and went home, guess who he passed on the roadside? Mordecai, who did not bow to him. And it made him furious. So by the time he got home, he forgot all about the fact that he had been to this banquet. And he's telling his wife, named Zeresh, which is a very beautiful name, right? Zeresh. And she said, are you the prime minister or what? Why don't you just go have him killed? Why don't you just get up and go to the king right now and tell him you want him dead? Don't wait until the 13th of Adar for him. Go ahead and do it now. So he instructed his servants. He said, okay, you build the gallows here in my backyard. he had plenty of land, I guess. And I'm going to go to the king and I'm going to ask for Mordecai's head today. So he goes to the king to ask for Mordecai's life. And what is the king just read? Just read that Mordecai has saved his life from those 2 guys. And he's asking his servants, did anyone honor him? No, we haven't done anything to honor him. By now, I think it's on towards the morning. Everyone's been up all night. And he says, well, is anyone out there waiting to see me? Because, see, they had to come into a little waiting area and they had to wait until he was just good and ready to see him. They said, well, actually, it's really weird, but Haman is here so early in the morning. He said, oh, good. Send him on in. And when Haman comes in, he says, what would you do to the person that you wanted to honor more than anyone in the whole kingdom? And this kind of got Haman off track. Because he had come to ask for Mordecai's head, right? But now he's like, well, he has to be talking about me. I mean, who else would you want to honor? So he thinks of all this stuff. Oh, let him ride on your horse. Let him wear your clothes. Let him wear your crown. Have someone to walk before him and shout out to everyone in the streets of Shushan that this is what you do to the person you honor. Yeah, do all that. And the king says, you go do all that right now for Mordecai. I mean, it's fantastic. So he is humiliated, right? He has to spend the whole day honoring Mordecai. And he went home to his wife, and she told him, she said, you're falling before him. Somehow he's going to defeat you. And before anything could happen, the king's guards were there at the door saying, come on, Haman, time to come to banquet number 2. He was escorted to banquet number 2. And of course, at banquet number 2, when King said, what is your petition and what is your request? Esther spilled the beans, right? I asked for the life of my people because she told him, I'm Jewish. And this man, this wicked Haman, has sold us to be killed and to be slaves. And this made Ahasuerus furious. He didn't know that Esther was Jewish. And he didn't know any of this. So instantly he has Haman hung on those gallows. And he's gone. He's off the scene. But, let's see, and I'm just going through all of this faster than these things can. So here's the thing. The law of the Medes and the Persians, they had this rule that if you had a law that was sealed with the king's ring, it can never be changed, ever. Even the king couldn't change it. No amendments. And so he told Mordecai and Esther, he said, Haman, and I'm paraphrasing all this for you, Haman's evil decree cannot be reversed. It is signed and sealed. So that cannot be changed. The evil decree stands. But he took the ring, I guess, from Haman, and he gave it to Mordecai. He said, I'm giving you the ring. And everything that Haman owned and possessed, I'm giving it to you. And his title as prime minister, I'm giving it all to you, Mordecai. You're smart. You go write a new decree that supersedes this decree. It's like, the law of gravity. God does not say, well, I'm sorry, I'm not going to suspend the law of gravity. But you can still fly. Just figure it out. Build an airplane. Build a spaceship. Go against gravity. Gravity's still there, right? But you can supersede gravity. So Mordecai and Esther came up with a new decree. And the new decree was, on the 13th and 14th of Adar, if anyone comes against the Jewish people, they can fight back. But see, it was a wholesale slaughter, and now it was like, no, they can fight back. And if you want to go against them, you'll have to wage a war. And be it known that Mordecai and Esther are Jewish, and Esther is the queen's wife. So now who in the empire is going to want to kill the people that is the wife of the king? I'm sure a lot of people backed out. Don't you think? Oh, I don't want to have. And that's the queen's wife's people. I'm not touching them. So I think a lot of them probably backed out. But then some of them still tried. But when the 11th months came, and the 13th and 14th of Adar came, the Jews won. And they were not slaughtered. And so God turned what was to be wholesale slaughter, and Purim became really the most fun day in Israel. So here's the Hamantashen. Here they are. This is what you eat. I haven't been able to find them yet. They're cookies shaped like triangles with a little pastry on the inside. And in Israel, people dress up in their favorite character. Okay? So my Hebrew teacher this morning, Netanyahu, he lives in Tel Aviv. He sent all of us, his students, the picture of him and his wife and kids. And you know what he dressed up as? They dressed up as their hero. He dressed up as President Trump. I have it on my phone. So it's really pretty, really funny. So now the thing I want to tell you is, I have a picture here at the end. So tomorrow night, the full moon of Purim, by the way, there's a lunar eclipse on Tuesday morning as well. And then all week I have been saying, the people in Iran, Iran is Persia. They changed the name from Persia to Iran in 1979. I said, the leader needs to read the book of Esther. It's not going to end well for him. I said it all week. And now he's dead. The day before Purim. So it's hard for y'all to realize that we are truly living in biblical times, because this is like Purim all over again. The evil Persian. How many times have you seen this man on TV say, the people of Israel will be wiped off the map? I've heard him say it 1,000,000 times. Now he's dead. And when I look on the map, Israel is still there. And they're going to stay there.
Someone mentioned that they took over, the Islam regime took over Persia 47 years ago, and this is our 47th president.
So there's my Hebrew teacher. He's I mean, he made a really good costume. And he is kind of dumpy, He's not a thin guy. He's kind of a. But anyway, he made a great Trump. And that was just taken this morning in Israel. So he dressed up as his hero. So that is the book of Esther in a nutshell, and it has come to pass again. And I don't know what the future holds. The war is not over, but I know that Israel is not going to be wiped off the map. It's not happening, because God is going to take care of the Jewish people forever and ever. Amen. So thank you all for listening, and we have to go now. But if you want these papers,